Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome to Rollin' Bones with Ryan Howard, your RPG treasure trove. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and welcome to Valor Studios. We are a TTRPG content creation community who love sharing our stories with the world. As I said, I'm Ryan Howard, and this is Rollin' Bones. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, it's a tabletop role-playing talk show where I bring on guests from the wide world of role-playing and talk with them about the work that they're doing, the content they're creating, and their love of role-playing in general. If you guys like what you see or hear tonight, definitely subscribe to our Twitch down here below my face, especially if you're an Amazon Prime user. You get that free Twitch subscribe, and we would love it if you would use that on us. You can find out some more information about Valor Studios and what all we have going on over at valorstudios.com or on our Discord, both of which you will see over in the chat here in just a little bit. And if you're joining us from YouTube, thank you for supporting us in that way. Definitely like, share, and subscribe over there, and feel free to join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. here at twitch.tv/Valor Studios. That's 8 p.m. Central Time every Monday night. And for those of you who want to share this with, the wider world, if you, again, like what you hear, like what you see, then, the YouTube channel is one way to do it. We also want to thank everyone who listens to us on audio. And again, if you want to join us live on Monday nights at 8 p.m., it's twitch.tv/Valor Studios. So, with that out of the way, tonight's big, mega, blockbuster episode of Rollin' Bones is canceled in lieu of me making an hour and a half's worth of jokes about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. I'm, of course, kidding. We have a huge show tonight featuring two people who really need no introduction in the tabletop role-playing world. So let's bring him on. You know him from Dungeoncraft, you love him, or maybe you hate him, I don't know. But please welcome Professor Dungeon Master, and also from Runehammer, the creator of the Index Card RPG, Mr. Hankrin Fernale. Guys, welcome to Rollin' Bones.
Yo, what's up, my man?
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Absolutely. It's great to have you guys back on. For anyone who is, again, tuning in for the first time, both of these guys have been on separately, but now they're on here together, and I believe this is the first time you guys have done something like this together. Is that correct?
This isn't the worst thing you've caught us. Yeah, I guess we have to dispel the myth that we're the same person. So unless one of us is deep fake, now everybody knows we're two separate humans.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a matter of which one's the Mr. Hyde in this case, I guess.
Is that the bad guy?
Yeah, he's the bad guy. I think we switch off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we alternate, absolutely. But there was one time that we rode bicycles together. And that was intense. That was beautiful. It was like, the scene where Kermit and Piggy ride bicycles together. That was the vibe I was getting.
Absolutely. And we do have to put to bed, actually we don't have to put to bed these rumors, because people are wondering, Hankrin, they've never seen you in the same room as Brandish Gilhelm or Ingrid Bernal. So, what's going on there?
I don't know. Yeah, me and the singer for Ram Jam, all four of us are sharing a body, kind of like that one of those horrible Keanu Reeves movies, which does not narrow down the movie list.
Ram Jam.
Surrogates, that's what it was called. We have 4 surrogates, but there's only one mind.
Man, now I've got Black Betty stuck in my head. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we want to start this off strong, and to do this, I'm going to lay out the criteria first, and then I'll ask the question. Everyone should be familiar with the rules of a comic book crossover, where two characters or two groups of characters meet, a misunderstanding causes them to fight, they fight to a stalemate, and then some kind of greater threat causes them to join forces. So with that in mind, how would the meeting of Deathbringer with a Viking Death Squad play out in your minds?
How do we know who goes first? Dan, you go first.
I think Deathbringer would be toasted because in Viking Death Squad, well, he's only got metal armor, but he doesn't have like power armor like the Viking Death Squad. And in Viking Death Squad, you don't have hit points. When your armor fails, you're dead. So he just doesn't have that level of technology.
Well, I would consider Deathbringer to be one of the immortals, though. He's not just a dude. Like, there's like a skeleton under that armor or some shit. It's not just like Carl from accounting under there. So I would give Deathbringer that mark, and they would discover that halfway through the opening salvo. Like, his helmet would get knocked off, and he'd be like, and they'd be like, oh, fuck, it's Nicolas Cage's skeleton. But that said, Deathbringer is only one dude, whereas the Death Squad is 10 badass. For being technical here. So, but we have to follow the rules. So they're not just going to cream him. Even if they can overcome him, they're going to get some respect for the way that he stands up to them. Mm-hmm. And then what, I don't know what the greater threat is, like a church like lands on both of them. Like from above. Like, oh no, this can't be good. And then I guess they both have to battle like a sentient church.
See, I was thinking, if I can chime in here, the greater threat that would bring them together, since Viking Death Squad is so heavily inspired by War Pigs, the threat that brings them together is not necessarily the War Pigs this time, but it's whatever it was that mad scientist Ozzy Osbourne made in his lab in the Bark at the Moon video.
Oh, that's like some Reanimator kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like the Bruce Timm version of Bane, sort of, but with more drippy parts. Mm-hmm. And it pops out, but it's got to be a human that saves the day. It can't be Deathbringer. Deathbringer's just a nasty motherfucker who mocks everybody. And the Viking Death Squad, they're like hard to relate to. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be like some little sort of mouse type dude, or like I don't know, like the girl from Lady Hawk. She has to like pop in there, and she's got, I don't know, got like an amulet that like makes Drippy Bane chill out. we're reaching here. We're reaching. It never meant to be a contest.
I don't know, Dan, do you have any thoughts on what the greater threat would be that brings everyone together?
Well, I was thinking it would be a demon, because you got demons in Viking Death Squad too. You know, like living in that hellscape, popping up all the time. So I would make it a demon.
It's like John Leguizamo Violator pops up.
Yeah.
Or whatever that thing on the cover of Bat Out of Hell 2, or...
Was there even a good soundtrack to Spawn? Like, I can't even remember. I think I always played the Mortal Kombat soundtrack in the background while watching Spawn with no sound.
I don't know. Leguizamo was good in that movie, though. He's like the best
thing
about
totally.
that movie.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Cool. So I've got some questions for both of you guys tonight, and I've got some questions for each of you individually. Obviously, if you guys want to weigh in on each other's questions, feel free to. But I do want to start something off here with Brandon. Between the last conversation we had and tonight, you have had something kind of major happen in that you are now working with and publishing through Modiphius. How has that been going for you so far?
Well, I mean, the quality of the books that they make, they use a printer in Lithuania, and the products that they make are really freaking awesome. The quality is super cool, not just because it's like an offset print, but it's, I don't know, it's got a really nice, it even smells really good. It feels really good in your hand. So that part was out of my reach before. So I love that. Thank you, by the way, Chris, if you're tuning in right now for all that stuff. It's probably really late for him right now. But I do have to put a big but on this, which is like sort of a mass, or what I would call old school publishing, definitely has some gnarly delayed gratification issues. You know, I really like being like in a one-on-one relationship with people who read the stuff that I make. And that may sound a little crazy when it's, like up, like more than like 10,000 people. But if you spread those people over the course of a few years, when you talk to them and stuff, you really can have like a dope like convo, even if it's a short one, with almost everyone that you get something to, or at least like half of them in a meaningful way. And I really love that. And I had gotten really used to that. And so then going to like this sort of, there's a shipping container of books right now it's like sailing over the Atlantic Ocean, and there's like a murder happened on the ship, where I added that part. But anyway, if you think about like shipping containers and like retail, like I don't get to meet any of the people who buy anything that I've done in retail. And so they keep telling me, no, this is great. You're selling a ton of books. Everything's working out. And I'm just like, I can't feel human emotions. So I gotta say it's a mixed bag. I really like the kind of cottage style of publishing. It definitely is limiting as far as scale and like, revenue, to be totally frank. Mm-hmm. But the big publishing, there's a less personal feel to it, and that's really new to me. So I'm kind of just like, I need to talk to my peoples. So I don't know. It's been cool, I guess. The quality of the books is really cool. So I just can't deny that aspect. But I don't know if I'll get ravenous about it. Some people go into big publishing and they kind of never go back to print on demand. But frankly, I kind of miss print on demand already. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Chris is if he's watching this, that's Chris over at Minodifius. He's going to like send me a stream of weird emojis in the morning But yeah, that's how it's been going. So it's mixed. It's awesome reach, but I miss the personal component of being tiny.
Do you think they'll let you do an index card Conan book?
Let me? I do what I want, man. Nobody lets me do anything. I don't know. I would never fuck with Conan, to be honest. That is sacred ground. That's I don't make jokes about the Christian God, and I don't mess with Conan. Those are two things that are just like out of my area. So I think they've done a pretty good job. I think there's mixed response to 2D20. Some people it can be crunchy. I think the Star Trek crowd absolutely loves 2D20. I know if Starships is out there watching right now, he is like a massive fan of Conan 2D20. I don't know. I knew Conan mostly from GURPS back in the early 90s, playing Conan. So I have no desire to fuck with Conan. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot prod. That's out of my zone.
Gotcha. And now, another question that I have for you related to some of the stuff you've been doing recently. You have been doing an OSE campaign. I have not dipped my toes into OSE at all. So as far as, your players' engagement with it, you running the game, how have you enjoyed running an OSE campaign? And then, Professor, I also want to get your thoughts on OSE as well, just because, again, this is a new system for me, not one that I've spent a lot of time in.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Me and Dan are very similar in that it probably doesn't matter really what we're playing. By the end of the third hour, we've mutilated whatever is salient to that night, So OSE is great. I love the books. They're very easy to handle. I wish they had more rollable stuff. Like, I don't know. We really like rolling D100s to get either a monster or a loot or something. I don't know why any book would ever not do that. So you kind of need to use the index to kind of wing it with that. But fucking OSE is great. I mean, it's D&D. So I mean, Dan would probably tell you the same thing. It's just like, yeah, look at this. It's D&D. Oh wait, oops, we've already homebrewed it halfway through the first session. I don't know. What do you think, man?
One of the things I noticed watching your show and on the Friday streams is how it kind of moved into a roll under system. It evolved, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it did. But well, the number one question we had as far as system goes, we don't talk about the system much. But the one that I had was like, what's my attack bonus? I must have heard that stupid question like 25 times a night. So about in our 10th session or so, yeah, just like Dan is saying, like we were just like this. I'm so sick of this question. You just roll under your strength to attack with a sword.
Yeah.
And some people would be like, oh my God, but that guy has a 17 strength. It's going to be too easy. Tell him that, because he will totally disagree that it was too easy, even though it seems like on paper that would happen. But yeah, we did. I mean, talk about a huge change that OSE does not mention.
I've played in games where people have actually done that with Dungeon Crawl Classics, where they turned that into roll under, which was also pretty interesting. So yeah, that's an interesting mechanic that I don't think a lot of people play with very often anymore. Is kind of that roll under scenario.
Black Hack
Suckers.
Does that. That's Black Hack. It's pretty much old school gaming, but you just roll under everything. But I love old school essentials. I think that the binding is great, the books look great, and I have a soft spot for Moldvay. You know, I mean, like that version is right behind me. I got 2 copies of it recently. So I love it for nostalgic purposes. But if someone asked me, like, well, what should I get? The arrangement and presentation of the new stuff is just so much more succinct, and you have everything on the inside covers. And I just think it's great. You know, I've always felt that the subsystems are a little wonky. You know, like switching off to pick a lock and you got a percentage, or climb a wall. Like, why aren't you using a D20? But I dig it. I love the low hit points. You know, that stuff is really cool. I love the simplicity of like 0 hit points, you're just dead. You know, those are all things I just love about that particular game system.
Yeah, agreed. Those are the absolute key points. But I got to hang with you on that one, Dan. If you go back to the original material that we associate with what's so great about some of this stuff, it is a little more difficult to process just moment by moment. Like, you know, the original stuff from the 80s can be a little more convoluted. Like, there is a salient increase in arrangement, I think, in OSE that is really, really nice, especially when you see people learning D&D right in front of your eyes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's one of the most valuable things about a lot of these OSR books, whether your poison is OSE or Dungeon Crawl Classics or Black Hack or you know, whatever system you're using, someone has already gone through, taken the you know, the good meaty chunks from those old school games and kind of left behind a little bit of the more obscure, more, you know, sloggy areas where it's difficult to understand what's actually going on, and they've arranged it in a way that's pleasing to modern sensibilities. So, you know, it's good to know that OSE does that pretty well as well. So.
If I had a big ding on OSE, I would say that which, you know, I mean, if you're playing old school D&D, you're probably a hacker anyway, but their monsters don't have a lot of like tricks. And I find that to be too easy for resourceful players. So like, take a giant alligator, for example. When we fucked with a giant alligator, I looked at the stat block and it's just like so dry. It would never have stood a chance against my players. It would be completely uninteresting. So I had to give it like a giant snapping bite. It was a save versus death as a sort of a trick. And then like, does it do that on its turn? You know, maybe I would flip a coin for that. And I do think tricks are, maybe it's because players are more savvy these days or something. Maybe they know about monster tropes in a better way, but dang if they're not hard to kill, even when they have like 6 hit points. Crappy these days.
Absolutely. And then one more question for you, and this is related to a book that both Professor Dungeon Master and I love very much, and that is this 5e hardcore mode book.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
Dan's idea.
this really is for anyone who wants to teach your players who are familiar with 5th edition how to play kind of in a more old school way where it's a lot deadlier, low hit points, all that stuff, capped at level 10, 5e hardcore mode. If I can get it to not reflect off my light there, 5e hardcore mode is the place to go for it. So the question that I have related to hardcore mode, do you plan on putting out any kind of modules or anything else kind of to go along with what you've got here in 5e hardcore mode, or
I
is
don't
it
know, but
just
first of all, I gotta mention that whole thing was totally Professor Dungeon Master's idea, straight up. He mentioned that in a video, must have been 2.5 years ago, saying, I wish they would make hardcore, literally called it hardcore mode. That's how uncreative I am. And we didn't really like know each other per se, but we were starting to orbit each other at that point. And so I was road tripping. I was actually moving. I had all my possessions in a van. I was crossing the country in a blizzard. So I'm white knuckling in the snow, like in freaking Iowa or some other hellish Midwest state. And I'm like, ugh. And in that moment, man, you really get some like brain nugging. And I thought, you know what? Professor Dungeon Master, he's fucking right, man. There should be a book that is just openly called hardcore mode. It doesn't even like there's no nonsense. So that is how that book was born. So right when I kind of had the idea and it was coming together, I had to contact him. I'm like, do you mind if I completely ape your idea? And he's like, yeah, cool. So on that front, there we go. That's where it came from. The book does include my vampire castle. It's super fun making modules for hardcore mode, but I'm telling you, curating that art in high resolution is no small task. I think maybe people think I just look up like public domain art and I magically get like these super tasty high res images of like etchings from the 17th century. That is not how it goes down. Like it is extremely difficult to get art for that material to hold the sort of level of historical art that's in there.
Yeah.
And that would be the only barrier holding me back from making another module. But yeah, that book is sold like crazy pants. So I guess it could be worth a few more like sleepless nights trying to find the one high res PNG of like, Gustav's fucking ship with the curly waves. Like, oh my God, that one just drove me wild. I failed to get a high res of that. But anyways, I would love to make more of that stuff. It's just a matter of how many times I get poked in the ribs by readers. Basically just do whatever I get poked most for. Like I reach a critical mass of people asking me to do things. So I'll count that as one poke.
Gotcha. All right. Now we do have a question here from James, the Dungeon Master, over here in chat. First of all, he's very complimentary of both of you guys. He says he's currently running Curse of Strahd with ICRPG and Deathbringer rules kind of mixed together.
Yeah.
So he credits you guys for helping him completely rethink the way that he's running his games. And along those same lines, he asks both of you, if you had to boil down your theories of game mastering to a single most important piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh man. Smoke is rising from Isengard.
I've got it. I've got this one. You want
Oh,
me to
sweet.
go first?
Yeah.
Okay. All D&D is 15 or better, you succeed. 9 or below, you fail. 10 to 14, gotta ask the game master or check a character sheet. It's the whole game. It's the whole game. No matter how high the levels get, no matter how many proficiency bonuses, instead of your boss monster, instead of having a difficulty 15, like on first level, you're on 7th level, it becomes 20. So the monsters are always getting progressively higher as well. and the whole, if you remove all the bonuses and the entire character sheet, 15 or better is a success. 9 or below is a failure. 10 to 14. Got to check with the game master. And the whole assigning difficulties, it's not numbers between 1 and 20. Why would you assign a difficulty of 2? If the player failed, they feel like they'd feel like a loser. It's humiliating. You only assign difficulties between 10 and 16. That's it. That's my single most point. If you understand that, you could run the game of D&D without any rules and probably without character sheets. That's what I think.
The single biggest GM tip. You hit the how to cook all the numbers down. So I guess I have to cook down the esoteric side. I mean, Dan's right. No matter what you say that golden number may be, whether it's 12, 13, 15, having a golden number, yeah, that's absolutely unarguable. Whew. I guess I would say I would go to my old, my sort of energy goal. Is that if you're going to be the game master, it is up to you to be the keeper of energy. You have to be fucking psyched. Play some motherfucking D&D, damn it. Bone crunching, kick-ass D&D. Not no sleepy pants staff meeting. It's like somebody grumpy in one corner looking at their phone. No. Your responsibility as a game master, of course, is all this other shit. Cool story, poetic stuff, numbers, like Dan said. But for me, it is like showing up and like getting the sort of the beacon of the fun level we're going to have right now. Like for the next few hours, we're going to have this much fun. Now, it's not like, like, I don't know, like sailing the Greek islands, jumping off the back of a yacht fun. We're not quite to that point. We're like just now a few notches below because it's a little more sedated. But you're coming in psyched. And I think the more going on in people's lives, the more burden you're going to have to do this thing. So if you have a lot of people who don't have a lot to do, it's super easy. But if you're either at a con or people got like heavy duty jobs or they got like scores of children running around, then it takes a lot to like rally people as a leader of like energy level. But if you can do it, then you get these games that we all remember. And for me, that is a huge deal. And I think it's why sometimes it's draining the game master is you don't want it to be fucking boring. Like screw boring D&D. I just can't stand it. So I think it's the game master's job not to make it friggin' boring.
I feel like we did a great job there summing up, like you said, the numbers and the esoteric side of things. That is really, really great. Now, one reason why I'm really excited to have Dan on the show tonight, you are who I would consider the foremost expert on urban role-playing, and I am trying to write a city book right now. So my question for you, Dan, to start things off here, when it comes to creating an urban environment for adventuring and role-playing, what tips do you have for making a city feel lived in and alive?
That's a great question. So I inherited my campaign, my long-running campaign, it's going over 25 years now, from a buddy of mine. And we grew up in New York City, and he grew up in the city. He grew up in Hell's Kitchen. And this is when Hell's Kitchen was Hell's Kitchen, where like Daredevil Hell's Kitchen. Like he was actually robbed in a school at knife point, like in the bathroom. Like it was bad. Like that never happens in New York City school today. The and Hell's Kitchen is like, I just took my family there. We went to a taco place. Like it's not like the same. But we grew up in like 70s, 80s New York, and we went taking the train all the time, and it was like Joker, like that's what it was like. So I think that definitely influenced his campaign and when I took it over. And you always had this sense that when you go to the city, that there are certain iconic places, like there's Times Square, there's City Hall, there's St. Patrick's Cathedral, and you go to these, and then Greenwich Village, this Forbidden Planet, and there are these places, and you go to them, and they're always the same. You always go back to the same. You see the same people there, and so you really have to have certain places that are defined. All the city doesn't need to be defined, but there's certain places and certain people at those places that make it feel like it's a real place. And a good model is actually The Simpsons. All right, when you think of The Simpsons, when you think of Springfield, like, okay, there's a nuclear power plant, there's the church, there's what are all the places? The school, right? The town hall with Jebediah Springfield, and the mayor is there, and Mr. Burns is at the nuclear power plant, and there's a person associated with that place, and you return to the place, you return to those people. So you want to have NPCs like at the Wizards Guild. You want to have Garen the Mage there, and it's always Garen when you go there. And when you go to the Drowned Rat Tavern, the contact there is Scratch, and he's an old guy, and you pay him in whiskey, and he kind of scratches this. Yeah, I can tell you about the Skull Gang, and so and the players keep going back to those places, seeing those NPCs. That's what makes it seem real. So if you need to know how to design a city, it's The Simpsons. And you don't have a map of Springfield, but you kind of have a sense of it in your head. I think that most people with a city, they start with a map, but you don't want to start with a map. You want to have it kind of existing in a not a completely nebulous space, like you're grounded in those certain pinpoint areas, and the rest of it you kind of is malleable. That was a long answer. I don't know if I did that right.
That was a good one. I like.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, one thing I've noticed, and one thing that you actually talked about in some of the city videos that I have watched of yours, city environments need different rules and different ways that people interact with each other, or that people interact with the players based on what they look like or how they're dressed or what they're carrying. And I've come up with a couple rules that I am planning on implementing in Nighthaven, my city. And so I wanted to run a couple of those by you and see what your thoughts were on this. So the first one is anytime there is a conflict, including combat or a loud discussion or some kind of chase, a die is rolled. If it's crowded in the city, it'll be a D4. If it's not, it'll be a D8. And in that number of rounds, reinforcements for the bad guys or the city guard are going to show up. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a good mechanic to make conflict or combat have kind of a different feel to it in a city environment?
I think it's a great mechanic, and it's very similar to the countdown mechanic in Index Card RPG, right? Where after a combat begins, a certain number of rounds, something terrible is going to happen, unless it is not resolved. And it's also a board game, Cadwallon City of Thieves, where the players are all these different street gangs, and they're going after these different magic items. And at a certain place, the timer starts, and they start gating off the sections of the city so you can't get away. Because if you're stealing from somebody, somebody's gonna see. That's why people move to cities, because it was safer. Like, someone's gonna see there's a dude on that roof, and at a certain point they're going to call the watch, and the watch have whistles, and they're going to respond. So I think a timer is a great idea. And I would add, this is another cool idea. I just read a module, Terror in the Streets. I got a review coming up. It's Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and they have an unrest die. So if there's something happening in the city, like people are being, there's a serial killer killing people, which is what happens in this module, that the unrest die moves higher, and the streets get more crowded, more violent, and you end up with crowds of people that are very angry. That's another cool mechanic.
Gotcha. Another thing you've talked about in your videos is the fact that in medieval cities, you could carry a dagger and a sword for self-defense, but generally speaking, armor and helmets and things like that usually frowned upon, if not outright illegal, in most medieval cities. So, in addition to having kind of guards try to make your paladin or your warrior take their helmet off and not wear their armor around, what would you say to a kind of like blanket charisma penalty to players that walk around armed for bear in the city?
My feeling is I don't like charisma checks for social encounters.
Gotcha.
I would have sumptuary laws. I would have, upon entering a city, the guards would tell the players, well, these are the rules of the city, and you can't. I mean, that's when your wealth was assessed. You were taxed based on what you had, and they would say, well, you can't carry a shield. You've got to take your armor off, buddy. You can't just carry a crossbow around. So they would be told that. And then you'd also have to register yourself. You'd have to, upon entering a city, you'd have to say, this is who I am. This is my destination. And the innkeeper where you stayed was legally responsible for you. So there was an incentive for that innkeeper to be a spy. So if you're saying to the innkeeper, yeah, where's the wealthy section of town? And the innkeeper would be like, well, why? Oh, no, we just, figuring out, we just might walk, take a stroll out tonight. And, these are people with like grappling hooks and dark cloaks on. Well, as soon as they go, the innkeeper would be obligated to tell the watch, hey, there are suspicious looking people in my inn. And when you go to a place in the Middle Ages, you have to go to a destination and someone has to vouch for you. So I would establish those things upon entering. And then once you're in there's a lot of clothing is very important. You're not allowed to dress above your station. And, I'm running this Power Behind the Throne, which is a great probably the best urban adventure ever. Political intrigue urban. I did a review of it, and I'm running it for some of my my youth group. And it's a lot of social encounters, including with people who are up there on the social scale. So they kind of meet intermediate characters who say, well, if you want to go to the opera, you have to dress this way. You can't dress the way you are. And then that leads to the characters having to spend an enormous amount of money dressing up to get into these different areas. Otherwise, if you dressed in an unusual way and you were in a wealthy section of the city, they would say, who are you? And they would make you leave. It was very important how you dressed. And people would be paying attention to it at the time. They would say, oh, you must be an adventurer because I'm looking at your boots. And so there's a sense that in these old cities in medieval times that everybody kind of knew who each other was and that, they dressed the part. So it's not that easy to sneak around.
Absolutely. And before we get on to the next question, just have to acknowledge Xavion85 in chat here is just making it rain with sub gifts. So thank you for that. That is very generous of you. We appreciate that. The next thing that I wanted to talk with you about when it comes to cities, one thing that I've tried to incorporate in my city is these elements of urban legends. So in Nighthaven, there may or may not be some kind of crocodile man in the sewers that players may or may not encounter when they go down there. Have you ever played around with any kind of like cryptids or kind of things that go bump in the night that may or may not be hanging around the sewers, graveyards, or places like that in your cities?
Absolutely. Every graveyard has ghouls. Every sewer has rat people. The key to making them cool is whether you call them skaven or rat men or vermin or were rats, like Fritz Leiber did. The key is you've got to figure out why they're still a legend. Like, so my vermin disintegrate as soon as they're killed. Like, just leaving the bones behind. Even the bones, kind of. That way they can remain a legend. Because if you could kill them and drag them up, stuff them at the taxidermist and put them on display, well, then they wouldn't be scary anymore. That's the problem with, like, Warhammer Skaven, like, that they're seen so often that they're no longer frightening. But the idea that there are these secret things, you know, mutants living in the city is very scary. So there's evidence has to be minimal, and they've got to disintegrate or something.
Yeah. Or there has to be something, some higher authority in the city that's determined to keep them a secret.
Or that could be that too. So I got a question for Brennan about cities, which is, you're not the biggest fan of urban environments.
Yeah, I would love to be a player in what you're describing, because I would be getting a massive education. Because well, we've kind of talked about this, you know, just between us, but you know, in I can't imagine all this order. My worlds are in such crisis all the time. It's like I guess you make a cool point, because like medieval is definitely a sensibility. So I liked how you use the mantra of saying, in a medieval city, rat-a-tat-tat-tat, and then you can put statements there, and like you can use cool knowledge to make that, you know, have veracity and truth to it. And I think in my mind, I was sitting there thinking like, oh my God, I don't think any of my games are in a medieval world. They're in a fantasy world. They're in a much more of a, like, going back to the Dusty Chestnut here, it's kind of more like a Conan world. Like, all of the cities and towns that we go to have major problems that are unfolding right fucking now. Like clothes, are you kidding me? Like, no one, lucky if you have clothes. Like, and there's one guy like just running down the street with like a big handful of like wedding gowns. You know, like, what the hell was that guy? I don't know. We'll never know. That was just welcome to my chaotic world. But the more that you were talking, it's fascinating, because the way that you're proposing little Rubik's cubes for players to solve, right? You're asking them to think about matching the colors on one side, and then maybe they'll start to think about the second side of the cube. And I do that too, sure, with my cities, but I think the colors on the Rubik's cube in my world are much more like, you know, the West Wall has crumbled, and like everyone is running around going crazy and panicking because, you know, the Huns are coming. And so I think it's just because I don't really have a mind for the opera is a perfect example. I know that a lot of players love this kind of stuff, this kind of nuanced, interesting, wow, this feels really quite real. Like, you can't go to the opera with a fucking winged helmet on. Like, that's, unless of course you're in the opera. But yeah. I just tend to not have those thoughts. I tend to have these kind of, like the thing with Spawn that we were saying earlier. I do think in a very Spawn-like world. Mm-hmm. So if you think of it, for those of you out there who read Spawn, there's not a lot of normal life when you're reading Spawn comics. Right. There's not a lot of sandwiches and stuff. Well, unless you read the Capullo ones, because he loves drawing sandwiches. But, you know, there's not a lot of like, you know, what's that outfit, or like, you know, what's your background? You know, where did you come from? You know, geopolitically speaking. Like, my mind doesn't really work that way. I think in like Uzis and battle axes, explosions, and like, so my cities, like Blackmoor is a perfect example. And Dan, I love your thing about Simpsons. Like, my Blackmoor is a lot like the Simpsons. So I know people out there run Blackmoor like you do, with like a much bigger sort of social brain. But my Blackmoor had all, you know, like these massive problems, like 4 major problems. And normal people are almost never encountered, because they're always hiding or slamming the shutters. You know, it's interesting when you mention something like a tavern too. Like, I imagine your tavern feeling like Mr. Underhill kind of a moment. You know, like the nuance is so detailed that Frodo needs to lie about his last name. Like, the levels happening in that micro encounter remind me of your style. And I think in my style, like my tavern, the one that we've been playing is called the Frothy Mare. And like, it's always just chaos. It's like the Muppet Show in there. It's like everybody's just like punching each other. And like, it's just there's this giant moose over the bar and like throw things at it and stuff. And it's just bedlam. And I don't really mean to do that. It just must be how I think, because to be totally honest, it sounds really nice to live in your world, Dan. Like where you have nice clothes, go out. That sounds amazing. Like my guys are like talking to a rat who is actually happens to be the king of the rats, and then turning around and like stabbing a guy and pulling his cloak back, and it's actually a frogman. And then there's like 40 of them. Like, so that's my thing with cities, is that I just do it. It's just a constant state of chaos in my world. We very, very rarely get some of the interesting stuff that you're talking about. And even when we do it, we kind of get it more like in forts or maybe in a camp. Like a camp is enough for me to process. There'll be a beautiful girl and she'll like take a liking to one of the heroes maybe. And that interest and that intrigue, but she's like off limits and she's part of this thing and there's actually some subterfuge. Okay, I can handle that like in a, when there's like 3 tents. because my brain is small. So that's my take on cities. There you go. It's not that I dislike them. It's just I do think they're notorious for slogging the game, but I don't think you have that problem, my brother.
And if I can, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
One thing that kind of differentiates the two in my mind, it's the difference between is the primary story or the primary action of your game going to be set in a city where you need to have some of that stuff figured out, or is a city just going to be another setting where something happens? I think it's a matter of how long is everyone going to be in this one environment, because if this is where everything is happening, you need to know a little bit more about that world than if your players just kind of stumble into a random city to have kind of an episodic encounter with something where, the West Wall is collapsing, like you said. In that case, you don't necessarily need to figure out what kind of laws the noble class has about how you dress when you go to the opera. But if you're going to be in the city for a while, at that moment, that's where you kind of need to figure out, okay, how do the cogs spin here?
Yeah.
I was going to say one of the differences between city adventures and other types of adventures that you might want to think about for your book is that a city, all the characters have all the resources. Like, you're not going to run out of, knives in a city. There are plenty of places to buy knives. It's like, like in a cave, you could run out of rope. In a city, you'll never be able to run out of rope. So what you have to do is think about, if you're going to have a scenario there has to be some sort of time limit.
Yep.
Every scenario needs a time limit. Like, you have to get this thing by sunrise, because that's when the Thieves Guild needs it. You have to stop the cultists, right? And you uncover the cultists, and they're going to sacrifice this victim, and they're going to do it within the hour. That's why you can't go to the Mages Guild and get Dumbledore to come down to the sewer with you. That is really important.
Amen to that.
Absolutely. And we do have a couple more.
In either style, that's absolutely true.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we do have a couple more questions here from the chat. John Q. Himes has a question here. So he wants to do kind of an old school dungeon crawl. He says Gygax AD&D type campaign with twisty corridors, wandering monsters, resource management, but he also wants to incorporate some of the plot elements, dramatic tensions, and he wants to know the best way to offer his players kind of both in the same game.
My feeling
Common
is
dilemma. Go ahead.
Common dilemma. Go ahead. You
Oh
go.
yeah, I think that's a common dilemma. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you want your spaghetti and your meatballs. But I guess if the question is sort of how, I would just I don't know, I would throw them in the twisty part. Twisty part is much more nuts and bolts, and I would let the story arc emerge from gems that they are accidentally planting. I would harvest their interests, not my own. There are always things I want to do in the campaign because I'm the weirdest person. I'm the game master. I'm the one with the most interests and the most research in the hobby. Fuck that. It doesn't matter. What matters is the little things that they're interested in, and you'll know within 45 minutes of putting players into a freaking, well, shit, just like Dan said, you got limited rope and you're in a freaking cave. And then there's some rat dudes. Okay, let's just go with like some of these basics. You will know very quickly what players are kind of interested in just by little verbal cues that they'll give. And that's where I would start to, do some hand wringing, not necessarily in the moment, but right when that first session was done, I'd quickly, before I went to sleep that night, I would get to the journal and try to harvest a couple of those little verbal cues that the players gave, if I didn't just outright ask them. And that was where I would build the archetype stuff, the story type stuff. But I would start with the simpler thing, which is the twisty corridors, the Gygaxian dungeon. That's that's just like breakfast in the morning. That you don't want a bunch of crazy experimental food. You want your eggs. When it's simple. So I would start there and then forget what I'm thinking about as a story. Just like pick up, maybe they think the undead are cool, or they're looking for strange symbols, and I'm like, I never said there were weird symbols, but interesting. Yeah, maybe there are weird symbols. So that's how I would merge the two. I would start with the simpler one, harvest what they're interested in to make the more complex one.
Yeah, there was a great episode of Questing Beast a couple weeks ago about Gary Gygax's Lost campaign rules, and it talks about how in original D&D, a campaign was for between 5 and 50 people, and that's because Gygax imagined the world. He imagined a world. It was like an MMO, where you have a bunch of different groups that are competing, and they're operating in the same area concurrently. So what you end up doing is like, and the prototype is in the basic rule book. It's the Caves of Chaos with the keep on the borderlands, and the keep's in the center, and the Caves of Chaos are nearby. And you would have a bunch of different groups going to the Caves of Chaos, meeting at different times. So you might go to Cave A, the Kobold Lair, but you went there after the first group, so all you find is dead, rotting kobolds and no treasure, right? now, and they skunked you and they took the treasure, and now you have a conflict. And then you go to a different cave, and then when they get there are dead goblins, and then that creates a dynamic where you always want to get back to the world as soon as possible because you realize there are competing forces. There might be 3 or 4 different groups, and then a story will emerge, possibly with other players in other groups being the antagonists. And you could have banners, you could have our adventuring, group. This is our adventuring, team or club or whatever. And then you've got other ones that are competing against them, and you know that they're there. And these stories will just emerge. Like if you get captured, you get thrown into the prison cells, maybe the other group comes and you got to ransom yourself out. And now you've got all these plots that you didn't think of. And that's the brilliance of, that's part of, it's, Gygax is not just, the corridors and stuff like that. It's how you build out this world. And it's a dynamic world with a lot of conflict that just naturally emerges. And you as the game master have to do what Brandon says. You got to listen very carefully to the players and write down what they're interested in. Oh, that's an interesting plot thread. And you kind of weave that into the story.
Yeah, and if I can take a swing at this one myself, I tried to do something very similar in my Dark Sun game, where the players encountered rumors in one of the towns that there were uh, green humanoids running around in the desert somewhere, and that they'd kidnapped someone's apprentice. Those green humanoids were orcs, and for people unfamiliar with Dark Sun, orcs are extinct. There are no orcs, so the people on Athos don't know what orcs are, including the players. So they find these people, and they're like, well, what are you? Where'd you come from? And they go, we came from down there. And they point at this giant hole in the ground. And so the players wanted to go down in there and find out, what exactly is going on in there. And what they found down there, they found treasure, they found magic items, but they also found lore. And they found out what this hole in the ground was. It was a dwarven citadel that Boris of Tyr, the big dragon, had literally sunk into the ground when he was going around trying to exterminate all of the demi-humans on Athos. And they found first-hand accounts of the siege from dead bodies and journals. So the answer that I found is effective in my games is, even if they go in there just for the treasure, even if they're going into the caves for the sake of finding cool stuff, there's got to be some lore, some fascinating things that hook them, and that's where I think Brandon's advice of listen to your players, listen to what they think is cool, and adjust on the fly if you have to. That's how you get the hooks of oh, what's this magic sword that's talking back to me every time I try to use it. Where did this thing come from? If they're super fascinated by that, then that's where you make the adjustment. But there's got to be something else down there besides shiny things. Now we've got another question here from Project Fullblade. Hi, Joe, or John. I think it's Joe. Good friend of mine, good friend of the show. For both of you, what's your favorite player or monster death that you've experienced in-game?
Geez, I don't know. I mean, just because of freshness and proximity in time, I'd have to say our character Zippler from the end of Osce, where he let himself be basically grindered into nothing in the plane of fire, because he didn't want to return to the world and be a vampire. He lived with that. So they had a way out, and they could have rescued him, and he chose to stay. And he was, I don't know if anybody remembers that great scene from is it from Riddick or Pitch Black? I'm not sure. I think it's from Riddick. The guy goes out into the, no, it's Pitch Black. No, it's Riddick. He goes out into the fiery dawn, when dawn comes over that planet and it's mega hot.
Yep.
And he intentionally walks out into this insanely hot wind in Chronicles of Riddick. Like tears his arm off. Like he goes down and his knees are the lower part of his legs are turned to embers, and he falls on his knees and he's just blown into ashes. And that's how we had described it. And it was super fucking sad because he was our leader. He was the only true good guy in our group. So I think that was mine, just because it was so recent. It's just still very fresh in my mind.
My favorite are when the players kill each other. I've written. I enjoy Paranoia once in a while.
Oh my god!
It's a great way to let the players let out. Every party has a little tension and allows them to shoot each other. And I also have. I'm working on now. It's called the Eldritch Hack. It's essentially Call of Cthulhu, but with only one stat characters. And there's a scenario in there called Cloak House, where if you're the last people left alive, you get to inherit this mansion. And the player characters basically ended up killing each other. That's always fun when they go after each other. It's not good in a long running campaign. I'm gonna have a whole episode Player-on-player combat is not good for a long-running campaign, but for like a one-shot, it's awesome.
Yeah, agreed.
And
especially if you can blame the elder gods,
Yeah.
you know, like if you can just couch it in some bugs from a fungus planet that like looked you in the eye, and so now you got to kill other people. Like that's just that's just moral carte blanche to kill other players.
Mhm. Nyarlathotep moves in mysterious ways. So just real quick to address this one from Christoph Gaming, tips for running Dark Sun: use Dungeon Crawl Classics. That is the best modern system that gets kind of the magic, the Vancian magic of Dark Sun right, in my opinion. I did a whole episode on it with Lou Alu. Definitely use DCC. And then, I mean, I can say this if you want me to, Brandon, or you can say it, because you had a great point about just the tone and the philosophy, the mindset of Dark Sun last time we spoke. If you remember it, I'll let you say it, but if not, then I can say it.
Well, I don't know. It's a very stripped down world. I mean, if a question is asked, are there X? There's no. That's like a really great place to begin.
Yeah, and the thing that has stuck in my mind ever since we had this conversation that you told me, Brandon, it's this notion that you look up in the sky and reach out to a god, and there's nothing there.
Nothing answers. Yeah.
Yep.
So again, there's the principle. Are there gods for me to pray to? No. Do I have a knife?
Probably not.
No.
The second do is sharp rock.
Are there trees? No.
Dan, do you have any thoughts on running Dark Sun? Have you ever done it before?
No, but I remember reading it, and I always thought that was the best D&D world. That was, and I don't know if they're planning to if that's one of the worlds they're planning to resurrect. Do you know if that's one of the ones? Because they've announced a few. I don't know if they're going.
I don't know.
I can't see it going well. If they tried to do it, it wouldn't feel the same.
I mean, look what they did to Avernus. You know, it was supposed to be a tribute to Dante's Inferno. It became like a bad Warcraft expansion. It was like all the colorful and zany things that you find in hell. You know, and it's kind of like, dang, that tone got botched. Oh, so like doing the Dark Sun tone, 5e Technicolor land, I don't know. It doesn't feel like a smart strategic move for the style that they're doing.
It's too hard to kill a 5e PC for Dark Sun.
Well, you'd have to include different variant rules, but what if I just feel if they're going to do it, they have to have Braum.
Yeah.
Because his art is just like, he is that world.
Absolutely. And he's evolved a lot since then. So if he were to come back, that would be insane. That would be insane, because his shit is so cool nowadays. It's totally out of control. He evolved massively since he did Dark Sun. So, oh my God, that would be so sick.
Absolutely.
I think Braum should just do it on his own.
I agree.
Yeah, just do a Dark Sun art book. Fuck the rules. We don't need more rules and character options, for crying out loud. Ridiculous. But if Braum just did hey guys, I did a Dark Sun art book. Oh my God, I'd be scooping that.
Oh yeah.
So cool. There's our character art right there.
Yeah, I think we just gave him a great idea. He should just have his own role-playing game that is Dark Sun, you know, just to not use that trademark name.
Dark Sun with no serial numbers.
I'm sure Braum is watching right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you are watching, Braum, the invitation to come on Rollin' Bones still stands. We've spoken a couple times. I want you on here, buddy.
Yeah, and do a Morkborg supplement that's Lost Gods. I mean, anything. anything. We will eat it up.
Absolutely.
At least I will. I'm a huge fan. I'm a Brahm stan.
Now, one topic that I really wanted to talk about with you guys, Jenny D recently made a very brilliant video about rolling less when we play role-playing games. And Dan, I know you actually made a post where you said you wish you'd made that video yourself.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think about, what she was saying in there? I tend to agree with a lot of what she said. I think there are circumstances where rolling too much slows the game down. So what are you guys' thoughts on her arguments in that video?
What do you think, Dan?
Yeah. Well, I actually posted on the Dungeoncraft Facebook group because it's just required viewing. And yeah, you don't need to roll for everything. Why are people make it? I have a passive perception of 17. Okay, why is the game master even calling for a roll? Why is that a thing? Why are you requiring anyone to roll a 5? Like, why are we rolling a charisma check for every single time you talk to somebody? Why is that a charisma check? It's just too much.
Is that a thing that happens?
Yeah. I'm guilty of it
Because
myself.
I've
done it
never
before.
encountered that. I have never seen a game played in that fashion. So maybe I'm just lucky. To me, it sounds like fixing a problem that exists in a limited space. I mean, rolling charisma every time you talk to a mofo? What? No.
Yeah, a lot of people just want to just like get past the social encounter. Like, oh, we have to talk to the king.
In what world? I have never, ever encountered that player. Is that real?
Yeah, they're on Reddit. You can
Let's
read
just-
Reddit threads and in the comment section of my videos. It comes up all the time.
It's
Fuck those people. Are you kidding me? Like, let's bypass the fucking social encounter? That's something somebody says?
Yeah.
What
What's one of
world
my-
is this?
One of my most popular videos, this charisma video I did, in which it boiled down to, don't use your don't use the stats so much. Just role play it.
Yeah. Fuck's sake. This is mind blowing to me. I don't understand what this is. I must live in a little niche universe because I have never, ever in all these years encountered a table that needs to roll less because they're over rolling to bypass things with mechanical flibbity gibbets. Maybe I'm just completely out of touch at this point. I don't know what's going on. I mean, props to you, Jenny D. Hell yes. Do not do that. That's crazy pants. Role play. So yes, I guess I'm done. I had a little freak out there, but I completely agree. Are you joking me?
It
like
is
rolling a d6, and if I get a 6, we get to fast forward to the next scene. What the fuck? Are you joking? Get out of my house. This basement is no place for that kind of crap.
Mom, kick him out.
We will have this conversation. I am a mango vendor, and I matter. Ay, ay, ay.
But
Poking me in a sensitive spot there.
To Dan's point, I think it is kind of a very modern problem. It's very much perpetuated by kind of the Reddit crowd when it comes to RPGs. I'm guilty of this myself. When I first started DMing, I would over rely on you're having a conversation, you're trying to get the better of it, make a charisma check every single time you want to move things forward, or always making people roll. It seems to be a very, very modern and maybe even a very 5e specific problem, and I don't know what it is. When you really look at 5e, it doesn't seem like that should be a problem that people keep running up against.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame 5e for anything. 5e is perfectly fine. It's a system that sits there and doesn't make you do anything.
Yeah, but
Doesn't
for some,
make you behave anyway. 5e cannot be blamed for anything. It's perfectly fine. It works great. Advantage is a cool mechanic.
Yeah.
I mean, the minute you say the Reddit crowd, I start feeling itchy.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, or if that's real, or if you're just describing like people who behave poorly because they're on Reddit. But in my knowledge, Reddit is a cesspool of behavior. It's
Not wrong.
really crappy, pseudo-intellectual behavior that I find appalling. That's where I'm at. So maybe I am living in a little fringe universe because I do not touch Reddit with a 10-foot pole. I think it brings out the worst in people. And I don't see it as very real. There's a lot of hypothetical BS on Reddit, and I don't like it. There we go. Yep.
I think
you wanted your hot take clip.
That's a good one. I think you have a lot of people coming into the hobby with 5e.
Yeah.
And what they want is they want rules for everything. They're like, well, what's the mechanic for that? Like in Strixhaven, they have report cards. You roll to get your grades on your report card.
Yeah, but do people want that?
I don't know.
Like
it's
in numbers,
like crazy.
Are these people real, or are these hypothetical people?
I don't know, but that's just the way it's got. Like, there's also rules for dating. Like, there's people want these social situation rules. Like, and I just think that's not a good in a role playing game. Just role play it.
Yeah, I mean, but do people want that, and is it making them want the game to be roll for your report card so you can work in a coffee shop in D&D world, or is that just a thing that's in a game? It just in a book that's written on paper. I don't think that these are significant social trends. I think we have a weird hypothetical player base that is being implied by some of the things that are being published. Mm-hmm. I personally do not think they're real in great numbers. I think people role play their conversations, and every once in a while, fuck yeah, you roll charisma because you need to expedite some shit, because let's go to the Goblin Cave. All right, word up, we're playing D&D. I really have a hard time believing that people want to roll for their grade in espresso making, that want to be the operative thing we're arguing about here, and in numbers. Just because it appears in a WotC book, I don't believe there are large numbers of players that are somehow a problem because they want to do this thing that's in a certain little rules statement. I feel like when you really sit down with almost anybody, they're great. It's fun. It's awesome. It doesn't have all these things we're always these boogeymen that we're like conjuring up out of 5e. You know, like I just throw it out there. At Mace, we sat down to play Morkborg, and with complete strangers, and our GM was like this super wild and awesome autistic kid. And right off the bat, he's just like, I'm autistic and I have ADD. And we're like, oh, fuck, this is kind of awkward. But it wound up being super fun and super awesome. So even like a fringe case that you know nothing about, playing a game you know nothing about, none of these hypothetical boogeymen appeared. Everybody kind of role played, but kind of used the dice when it was handy, and kind of got along, and we kind of played in turns, but we kind of fucked with initiative when it was handy. And that's D&D. I don't know, this hypothetical crazy shit, it really gets me itching. I'll tell you what, as you can tell.
Yeah, it's and to your point, I don't know how many people experience this at their tables, but there at least seems to be enough steam for this building online that, Jenny felt the need to make this video and speak to those people. So someone out there somewhere is either doing this or at least telling people they're doing this and telling people that they should do it this way. So
that is a very fair and calm assessment.
Yeah, I rolled dice too much. I called for too many die rolls when I was younger. So I think it's natural, and it's also natural sort of for people who are getting in the hobby, they're learning it. the question becomes, isn't there a mechanic for social encounters? Why isn't there a mechanic? How do I run a social mechanic, encounter if there's no mechanic for it? There's a kind of a feeling among some people that like, well, Wizards of the Coast is up there, and they're in lab coats studying this thing, and they're going to come down, and they're going, and it's, if you think it up, it's wrong. If they think it up, it's good, and they're waiting for the right. That's where a lot of it comes from. They're waiting for social mechanics, and I just think social mechanics is any kind of more die rolling is not necessarily good, especially for the role playing part.
And I think a lot of that definitely happens in the conversation of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, when you sit down with 5 people, shit just is not a thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going, of course, only on anecdotal evidence. So in my anecdotal evidence, these conversations stay on the internet. I'm not sitting down with people who are going like, how can we resolve talking to this mango vendor with a WotC approved mechanic? I'm like, what are you saying? Are you a trash scanning robot? Where did you come from? Get out of here. No, normal people don't say that kind of shit. Anyway, whoa.
I do think a lot of this comes down to the new players. When you say, you just role play it, you just, you decide as the GM how this is going to go, like, and that's how you do it. They go, that's arbitrary. And what you have to realize as a GM is it's all arbitrary. This whole thing is arbitrary. And you as the GM are in the position where, you arbitrate. You are the arbitrator. You're the arbiter and you know best, to quote chess. So you really have to embrace that side of things of, yes, this is arbitrary, but we all agreed to do this. So,
have you guys ever been in a game?
Yeah.
A player barked at the GM and said, that's arbitrary.
I have, but I will give the player who did that credit that they were very tired at the time, but I have had someone go, well, that was just arbitrary. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah.
You're like, these mangoes are 3 gold pieces each. That's arbitrary. Okay, so anyway, Dan, you nodded. You've encountered this in the real world.
I've had so many angry players, like over the years, like rules lawyers that are like, that's not the way it's done. I'll give you an example of something tangentially related. Armor classes. Why is chainmail and a shield armor class 15, 16? Because Gary Gygax decided 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Everything in the game is the game master sets a difficulty class, except armor. So like when I'm running the game, it's like, okay, what did you roll? You rolled a 15, you hit it. I'll chuck, when I'm rolling with my players, I'll chuck a handful of dice and I'll be like, boom. I got 4 hits. You 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Right? Like that fast. But some players are like, well, my armor class is 16, but I'm rounding to the nearest 5. You know what I'm saying? It's like, why is armor class a specific number? And it's because Wizards of the Coast printed the book, and it's weird. It's like, well, the game master can be imaginative and should set a difficulty, except for this thing. We have a chart. And it's like, it's a suggestion, It doesn't have to be that way. And then you get people who are like, let's stop and look up the rules. That's a big thing. I mean, it might not be, for you or for me. Because
it does happen with spells. I think that syndrome I've seen happen with spells a great deal.
Yeah.
People want to stop the fun and look up the spell. And, if that's fun and that's interesting, then yeah, rock on. But I don't know, if we were playing and you threw 4 D20s on the table and I saw 3 of them are above 15 and it's like 3 arrows hit the group. I mean, I'm like, fuck, this is great. This is going to move quickly.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing we're scratching at here is the god status of numbers that are written in books by people who work at a corporation that's owned by Hasbro.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically.
So if that is a saliently large group who feels that way about certain numbers written by a certain group of people, I feel for them. They're living in a mind prison. And I hope that they find their way out of that mind prison before it's too late.
I mean, I've seen young people playing D&D, and it's like that. It looks like 6 kids like sitting around. One's on a phone, one is asleep, and the game master and 2 other kids are looking up rules. I mean, I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
So that's they got to watch more Runehammer and more Dungeoncraft.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know, but wow, holy shit! It's like when the thing came out that you could have an elf with like a strength bonus. Holy shit! Stop the presses. An elf with a strength bonus? Dear God, are you mad? It's heresy. No, I mean my elf is kind of ripped, like that's what I'm thinking. And they had to do this whole thing of like, we've opened it up, and it's just like, is there seriously a large group of people who was refusing when a player said like, hey, wouldn't it be kind of cool if I had like a beefy elf rather than like a Legolas type character? Like, in my mind, that was just unthinkable, but I guess maybe that is a thing, and I have a new name for it, and I'm going to call it the Mind Prison.
The Mind Prison. That's a good one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you writing that down puts you in your own mind prison.
I'm writing it down. I'm writing down the Mind Prison. But
you're writing never say, and then next to it, Mind Prison.
I don't know that I fully get the concept, Brandon. Could you perhaps print it in a book with a D, an ampersand, and a D on the cover?
Oh man, Mind Prison. It's probably a spell somewhere.
Yeah, but bring it back to Ginny D. I think she's great, and that was a great video. And I think it's great because she hits a younger audience than I do. And I think it's cool. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's a lesson that I think we all needed to learn a lot earlier than we learned it. Me, definitely. So, yeah, I'm glad that Jenny's out there giving that message to kind of that big audience that she has there. Maybe we'll get a few people paroled from the Mind Prison, thanks to Jenny D.
I hope so. That's good work. Good work being done. And cosplay is definitely a gateway drug to escaping the Mind Prison.
Yes, it is. Now, one last topic, and maybe this is too big a topic to end with, but I'm going to try and do it anyway. I very recently kind of stumbled upon this notion that we as game masters are the watchmaker. We set the cogs, we put everything in motion, and then we give this machine, as it's moving to the players, and say, how do you deal with this thing? Are you going to try and stick a stick between these cogs and see if you can make the robot stop moving? What are your thoughts on this idea that GMs are watchmakers? Do you agree with that? Do you have other thoughts on that? Do you think I'm wrong? I kind of just want to run that idea by you guys.
You want to go first?
I absolutely am not a watchmaker.
Okay.
Like, I don't even fully know what that would mean. I do know that there is a beautiful myth of a finely tuned sandbox world that is slowly uncovered by characters that had previous reality before it was looked at. And that sounds amazing. But no. I don't see it that way. I see it much more as friends discovering sort of devious things together on a week-to-week basis. And I'm well known for this, that anybody who plans more than one session into the future is denying their players magic of what this is. I strongly believe that. So if the watch is being built by all 5 of us, one cog at a time, okay, I'm okay with that. But the concept that the GM holds some wondrous thing to be exposed, I think is silly. I think the thing to be exposed that's wondrous is the relationship between the players when they actually start to expose their true flaws and psychology to each other, whether on purpose or not. That to me is the touchdown of game mastering, not oh my god, the good guy's actually a bad guy. To me, that is not magic of it. So I think I'm going to give a resounding no. I am not a watchmaker. It's more like I don't know. It's more like gardening.
Yeah.
If you want to use that analogy, insofar as when I think of my villains, they're on a timeline.
Yep.
Like the world constantly moves forward. Like there are certain events that'll happen. Like, well, there's going to be an invasion at this point, and that. But I'm not going to say to the players what they're going to do. That then I guess it would be a watch. But like Brandon, I don't plan more than a session ahead. I don't know how you could do that, really,
right, yeah.
Because and even in the types of campaigns I run, which again very much in the keeping the Borderlands kind of realm, where you have, I guess, if you want to see the Caves of Chaos as part of the watch, and the characters are going to interact with it, then maybe. But I just kind of go with the flow and let the players, as long as they do it one session in advance, you got to tell me at the end of the session, where do you want to go next time? Because I have to be able to plan for you. But like, whatever they do, it's going to be weird. It's going to be more interesting than you could have thought of by yourself individually. And if you try to script out an epic quest, they're not going to go on it.
Right.
They're not going to go on it. Like, you can't have Lord of the Rings the way it's written as a role-playing game campaign, because
right.
one of those characters, one of those hobbits, would have stabbed the other and taken that ring.
Yeah.
Like there's no way a player in D&D would not take the ring. That's what Gandalf says. Oh, terrible things are happening. I don't care. I want this ring. I want to level up. And that's what they're gonna do. So you can't force it. If you try to force it, they're not going to do what you want anyway.
Lord of the Rings campaign, all Boromir.
Yep.
9 Boromirs set out from Rivendell.
That's what it would do. They'd be fighting over who gets to wield the ring, and and then they would be like, "I'm gonna kick Sauron's ass," like I'm gonna put this ring on, and I'm gonna go right into more. And that's what we do. So just let him do it.
I do kind of approach it as, like you said, the world is constantly moving. I'm not trying to, set up, like Brandon said, a huge sandbox that's slowly uncovered. It's more, really it comes down to the villain. The villain is going to do what the villain's going to do. How do you intersect with what he has going on? How do you interact with his plan to cross the river and take over the other kingdom? What point do you interfere? Where do you kind of come into that? Because I've set this in motion. This is going to happen. You don't know when. You don't know where. Maybe you don't even know that it's happening. But you're going to see the consequences of it as they unfold.
I like that a lot. Rather than a watch, it's like rolling a bowling ball. And that's also kind of what Dan mentioned. Like, the invasion is going to happen. It might be like session 8. It might be session 14.
Yeah.
But it's going to happen. Like, the Huns are coming. I'm going to roll this bowling ball. I know some shit about this bowling ball. And I like your point there. Like, I know some properties of this bowling ball. I got a few secrets. Because, I got drunk the other night and I wrote down some crazy shit. And I'm going to stick to that stuff. But it's only about this bowling ball, like this whole other everything else is completely up for grabs. But I do like that metaphor, because then at the beginning of the campaign, you do kind of like go, yeah, and you kind of slowly roll it and watch it go down. And sometimes players just go the other direction.
Yeah.
That is definitely a possibility. But a watch just feels so controlled to me, whereas a bowling ball is kind of like, what the fuck's going to happen?
And I just used. Sorry, what was that, Dan?
I was going to say, there you go. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Bowling.
And I do see what you guys are talking about with a watch being kind of a controlled, complex environment. I just used it that way because of the idea in deism that God is a watchmaker and set the universe in motion, and I felt like it kind of you set the universe in motion and then the players interact with it. So that's where the watch came from. It's not, that you're making a Swiss timepiece that has all these intricate pieces that all move. It's more just you've set something in motion for these people to interact with now.
We're getting metaphysical, but when I think of the world as a role-playing game, I always think the real world, if there's a deity, it's not a watchmaker, it's a force that has given the universe power to recreate itself. That's what humans do. We recreate ourselves. We have a portion of control in that universe. We're creating the universe for future people. So it's an organic kind of, you're a participant in the creation, as opposed to this was created and now it's just going to keep moving forward because it's mechanical. It's organic. And that's how I tend to think probably our real existence is, and also about, role-playing games too. Like, ideally, it should be a situation where the game master kind of thinks of parameters, but then the players have a share in that creativity. And if there's a deity, that would be a more advanced deity, to give its creation a part, a share, and make it self-perpetuating.
I think it's just because we're poking holes in it doesn't make it a non-useful metaphor. I think it's a super useful metaphor, because it brings up a really gnarly question, which is like, is a game master like a god inside the context of the world? And my answer would be absolutely not. If anything, the game master is more like the mango vendor. And in a way, the players are accidental gods. I'm also, to get metaphysical, to ante into the poker game with Dan. I'd like to ante in as a person who doesn't really find familiarity in the concept of like a watchmaker god or like a big sort of monotheistic god. That's just not part of my world. That's hard for me to put my head, even when I talk about a god or a deity, I think of them just as sort of like big, awesome, durable people. I don't think of them in this mega St. Augustine kind of context. But I love it as a thought experiment, because it asks, is a game master like a god? And I think in the funnest possible game, if funnest is even a word, I don't think a game master is a god. I think a game master is like a servant, is like a street sweeper in a way, is like a lowly sort of wilderness guide, who's kind of just barely hanging on in a way. Like, I almost never get like this feeling. I don't know about y'all. I much more have like this kind of feeling as a game master. Like, we're going too fast and the wind's getting really strong. Like, how you guys want to do what? Oh crap. Okay, you're gonna go up the river, but what about, well, okay, actually forget it. So it's very interesting metaphor to muck around with.
And I think what this shows is the way that the three of us, the way that we perceive the world and the way that we perceive the idea of a creator, a god, is kind of informing the way that we see role-playing games. Because again, to also put my chips on the table, I am coming at this as a religious person who believes the J.R.R. Tolkien quote that we create because we are created. So I think that's what's informing my view of this and my kind of couching it in that metaphor where, your view on not being able to really conjure up the concept of gods in that way, Brandon, is kind of informing, your view of this. And Dan, yours is probably having some kind of effect on your view of how all this works. So it says interesting things about people psychologically that we approach the games in these ways, I think.
And how much chaos ensues.
Yep. Cool. So on that highly metaphysical note, I think that's probably where we need to call it for this evening. So I will turn this over to Dan and Brandon. If you guys will tell people where they can find your content, what you've got coming up pretty soon here, the floor is yours.
You go first.
Yeah, Google Runehammer. You'll find all of my stuff. I have a complete corner on that word. So, find all my shenanigans. As for what's coming up, I have no freaking clue. I just finished like a 70-hour week trying to do a game jam with myself to publish a con-style game to Patreon in 1 week time, which was a super dumb idea that like really just ate my brain. So what am I going to do next? I have no idea. I'm getting really interested in collaborating. On that note, that is kind of coming up. I am I am the publisher for Scotty's upcoming Easy D6 game. So there's a lot of super fun stuff there, and I'm going to be a publisher for the first time. So process that. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and we're going to have a motherfucking blacklight poster, yo.
Nice.
So keep your eyes out for that blacklight poster. That's and you got to buy one so I can pay my rent. That's about my stuff.
If you're the publisher, that makes you my boss because I'm writing the introduction to the Easy D6.
I'm your boss.
Yeah, he asked me to do the introduction, so I'll be doing that. You can get my stuff at Quest Givers. I got Macbeth there. I got Frankenstein, Professor Dungeon Master's Frankenstein. I have the Eldritch Hack coming out. It's a one-stat Cthulhu game compatible with the more popular Cthulhu game, and that's going to be coming out a couple of months. And I'm constantly working on my house rules Deathbringer.
Oh, we have a kitty.
We're at that point. We're at the cat stage.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great episode, even if we got metaphysical there at the end. This has been a great conversation. I'm glad that you were able to join me on here. Once again, guys, just as a reminder, if you like what you saw tonight, we put on stuff like this every week here at Valor Studios. So, follow us here on Twitch. Hit the subscribe button if you feel so inclined. And if you want to know what we've got coming up, valorstudios.com and the Valor Studios Discord, which you'll see in chat, are some of the best ways to do it. You can find my stuff specifically at Howard_Ryan Gregg on Twitter and Instagram. Instagram's the place where you can see the miniatures that I like to paint. So there's that if you're into minis. And speaking of minis, next week we have a guest on named David Wood. He is one of the contributors to Lost Minis Wiki. He is also the brain behind DearTonyBlair.com, which, unlike the name suggests, is a miniature archive. And he and I are going to be talking about how miniatures evolved from wargaming and got into tabletop gaming. We're going to be talking about some history. We're going to be talking about the Prussians, talking about H.G. Wells, all kinds of crazy stuff with the history of miniatures and how they have become what they are today. So that'll be next week. And until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I am so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and with us at Valor Studios, and I will see you all next time.